On behalf of the Oregon Project Management Advisory Board, welcome to our Project Management Users Group. My name is Ben Kahn. I'll be your host today. We have a great presentation lined up for you today, so thank you for joining us. Please mute yourself if you haven't already done that. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Lisa Martinez. Lisa currently serves as manager for stakeholder engagement at ODOT's Driver and Motor Vehicle Services Division. Lisa, together with fellow members of the stakeholder engagement team, supports change initiatives, including internal and external communication. She also frequently assists both the ODOT Transportation Leadership and the Oregon Ascent Leadership programs in the role of mentor, coach, and facilitator. Lisa has worked in ODOT since 1994 in a variety of leadership related positions, mostly related to people management, organizational development, and continuous improvement. Facing challenges head on and helping others discover their inner strengths is what Lisa likes to do best. She continues to grow her organizational behavior expertise as an active member of the Association of Change Management Professionals and Public Sector Change Practitioners Community of Practice. Lisa holds certifications in PROSI Change Management, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, Thomas Kilmann Conflict Instrument, Kilmann Advanced Conflict Management, and the Leadership Circle 360 Leadership Profile. Please welcome Lisa Martinez.
Thanks, Ben. And it looks like we have a good crowd here. I'm showing about 60 of us. And so I want to just thank and welcome everybody here. Up on your screens, you should be able to see our PowerPoint presentation that we're going to use today as we talk about our experience and what we've learned. And hopefully the topic of no one told me about this or this isn't what I expected helped drive you to attend today. We're going to be using Slido.com. So if you have access to a mobile device or even can open up another window in your browser and go to Slido.com, the event code will be PMUG 11. And we have 3 polls that we'll be using throughout. So if you want to log on to that and be ready to go for those polls, that would be great. So let me tell you a little bit about who else is here with us today. I have Nina Hunko, who is our Innovation and Planning Project Manager, and Scotty Hamilton, our Organizational Change Analyst, and they are helping me today. They will be monitoring the participant list if any of you raise your hands and have a question. They'll also be looking at the chat if a question comes in that way. We encourage your questions throughout the presentation. Don't have to wait until something at the end. If there's a question or a comment or something that you want to add into the conversation, really would love this to be two-way to this afternoon, please do. And of course, I'll round up with any outstanding questions at the end. So with that, I will move forward. And again, Slido poll, really easy to join. www.slido.com, and the event code is PMUG 11, and that is case sensitive. So here we go. This will help me. What's the one thing you'd like to take away from this session? If you can slide that into Slido, that will give us an idea of what I need to make sure that I cover today with you. So you see we're kind of building a word cloud here on things that, a way to keep from losing more hair. I like it. The absolute worst mistake a PM can do regarding change management. That was an interesting one that I saw come up. easy to put into practice tools, our lessons learned, out of the box ideas. I bet this group of 60 some odd participants has some great ideas about out of the box ideas. How to manage expectations. Okay, we'll just gather a few more if anybody is still working on logging in. How to get input. How to effectively communicate, lessons learned, some best practices. All right. What was hard to accept? Oh, okay. What was hard to accept? All right. Well, we'll go with that. I mean, thank you all. This gives me an idea of what I need to focus on as I, kind of go through the next hour with you. So, one of the things I wanted to share with you is, what is OCM? How does organizational change management? And I'll apologize up front because sometimes I will say OCL. And that's because here at the DMV, we chose to use the term organizational change leadership for two reasons. One being that it really takes sound leadership to make this happen. It's not about methodology and just running through the methods. It's about leadership. And we really needed to make sure as we introduced this whole concept to our division how important that role was. And the other is that, it's just really easy to get tied up around the word management and get it confused with project management and or other things. So we chose OCL. So if you hear me say OCL rather than OCM, that's why it's interchangeable for the purposes of our conversation today. Why would you, in your project manager roles or your analyst roles, really want to support and have OCM as part of your teams? I think that's an important thing for you to know. And what this does is it really, helps you understand what resistance will look like in others and how to manage that resistance and help build resiliency in people that are maybe undergoing lots of change, different initiatives, or just a massive change initiative. Both of those circumstances, as we all well know, through this pandemic and wildfires and you name it, what's next sort of environment that we find ourselves in 2020, change fatigue is real. So it teaches you a little bit about that. So that's one reason why you would want to invite that expertise into your projects. And it will help you and identify what resistance looks like in yourself. So where might you be resisting in an implementation project that you're having to lead or in something that you're having to participate in? And it gives you really great tools to practice communicating with others, and you'll learn about some of those today. And then they'll just come second nature to you as you're leading projects, like, hey, we need somebody to do this. We need somebody to build these talking points. We need somebody to create our communication plan, right? That's focusing on externals or this segment of our audience. It will really help you understand what your culture is. And so one of the things that we do when we do change assessments is to really identify what are the cultural norms. What is it that we say we do in policies and procedures, and then what's the way the work really gets done? And learning about that piece about how work really gets done is critically important, because there will be nuggets there that you really will support what you're trying to do. And then there will be information there as well, really, really necessary for you to know, because it may be a barrier for you or somewhat of a hurdle that you have to compensate for and mitigate to get around. Let me give you an example of that. So at DMV, when we started our major system upgrade, right, our COT system, and we did our culture assessment, we found out that our culture was very collaborative in its decision making. Now that sounds like a really great thing, right? And it was. Everybody, you know, what it produced was lots of buy-in on items that we were initiating. So that collaborative decision-making culture where you really like tested things all the way down, brought as many people into it as you could, you know, really gave them an opportunity to provide feedback and influence the decisions. Awesome. And it took months to get decisions made sometimes because, oh my gosh, the field only meets once every month to have, you know, their managers to have these meetings, and oh, we've missed that date, you know, it was 2 days ago, so now we have to wait till the next month, and oh my gosh, now we have to get down to 60 field offices, and the same thing, you know, true in other parts of our division. So knowing that as part of our culture and going into our project was really critically important. And what it created for us was the necessity of creating a decision-making model that really drove decisions down to the lowest level. And as a change practitioner, what that meant was really trying to get people to understand and appreciate the why that those decisions were being made now without their influence or without their feedback. So we had that decision tree, as I'm sure that you've had in a variety of your projects, and it went up based on the type of the criticality or risk of the decision. And that was huge. That was really huge for our organization. And if we hadn't started communicating about that early and getting people to understand what that would look like, we would not necessarily, you know, I mean, this helped us make sure that we had the right people at the right levels doing the work who would be able to make those decisions and have the knowledge to make those decisions. We had an organization come in to put in our COT system, and their name was FAST, and they lived up to their name. And so that quick turnaround on decisions was absolutely vital, and something that we learned how to mitigate and compensate for because of the culture assessment that we did. Another one that we identified with, you know, our culture assessment was what it was like, you know, that we had silos and that there were breakdowns in the silos, and that there was a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for, permissions required to talk to somebody across a silo or to a different unit. Like it just wasn't natural for people to go to one place or another and have a discussion about how to improve something. You know, you had to go through the proper channels in order to have those kinds of conversations. So that was another piece of our culture that in identifying that, we were able to say, okay, is that the way we want it to be? And, you know, what else can we create here? And that really helped us in developing a culture that now really looks to be inclusive of each other, the upstream, downstream pieces of the work, in a way that they weren't doing before. Not to say that we were never doing that. Certainly when we pulled together certain project teams or implementation teams, we were bringing everybody in from these various areas and discussing it. But sometimes those meetings would happen in a one-off. Sometimes they would happen in everything. Not always would people understand their impact on one another. And now we're doing that in a more thoughtful way of really trying to understand and appreciate the impact that we have on one another, the decisions that we make, and the changes that we make in our processes. And then another cultural assessment tidbit that came out was, you know, our appetite for risk. Where was that? And so learning about where our appetite for risk was as an organization was really important. Where were we going to be able to step out and take chances, think outside the box? And were we the kind of organization that would be willing to do that? So we found out that, yeah, we were, you know, we would take some risk, but we were not as, we were more risk averse than risk balanced in many areas. And I would say that that's something that we've grown in over the course of the last 3 years in terms of really being more risk balanced when we look at the decisions that we make. So that was a big piece of change management methodology that was applied that gave all those tidbits and nuggets to our project team. And then finally, the readiness assessments that we conducted throughout the 3 times. We did this 3 times for each of the 2 rollouts that we did. So we separated our rollouts of our project into vehicles and drivers. And so for each one of those rollouts, we did 3 readiness assessments. The first was early on, and it was a baseline assessment. And the second was about mid-road, after we had done a lot of our awareness and desire work in terms of making sure that people understood what we were doing and why we were doing it, why it was important to them, why it was important to our customers, and what type of things that we're going to be changing. We did another assessment. And it's not like you're looking for so much that everybody's improving. You're looking in those assessments for who's not getting the information. So where you might see that, I've got this group over here that doesn't seem to have the sense of understanding that the other areas do. Let me go put my resources there and trying to get them to a greater level of awareness about what we're trying to do, or knowledge of what that change is going to be like to them, wherever they kind of fall out in those assessments. And then we did a third one, very close to go live. And that one was after we had delivered training and our, the massive information, and that people had a chance to either have completed their training or be in their training, or have gotten the majority of their policies or information sheets or whatever else it was, or tools that they were going to need for go live day. And that assessment was something that, again, for the project team who was going to have to support the implementation and people doing this work on go live day, that was really helpful information, again, to know where are the pockets where we might need to devote more support resources on that day in the coming weeks. Who looks like they're doing pretty good. So that was really helpful information. So that's kind of some of the things that OCM, OCL methodology and subject matter experts in that area can bring to your project teams. So is that a question or a participant? Got it. So we're going to do another poll. For your most recent completed project, impacted staff were, and just choose one of these: well aware of and supportive of changes, surprised by some of the changes, unprepared and or upset by changes, no impacted staff. Again, this is using Slido. The information to join is right there on the left side of the screen. Give this a few more minutes, but it's good to see that predominantly most folks were aware of and supportive of changes. That's a good figure, 30%. Surprised by some of the changes. That's great, right? Right, got about the same number that responded last time. So I'm glad to see that no one chose no impacted staff. Because that is rarely the case, that there's not someone impacted by a project or the things that we are doing. And surprised by some of the changes, if they're not like major, it depends on what type of changes they were surprised by, right? So that question doesn't really get to the meat of it, but the less surprises, the better. Let me just put it that way. So managing the expectations of people. Well aware and supportive of the changes, 29%, and then unprepared and or upset by the changes, 23%. That's pretty close, really, in terms of figures. So what we want and what change management practices can do is help move those numbers up, where they're what you want to see is that people are well aware of and supportive of the changes, and that there aren't too many surprises for them. You certainly don't want to be in that unprepared and upset by changes experience. So again, this is a tool that change management can bring to you. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about what we did to support that. And we really relied on and leaned on our managers. And as I said earlier, they are change leaders. Anyone in a management position is automatically a change leader. That's part of their job. And it's their responsibility to help support staff and help them manage their expectations around change and to be ready for whatever the new way of doing work is. So maybe your project might be the first to use change agents in your organization. It was for us, right? This was the first time that we really identified and created a group of change agents. And I think our numbers, went up to about 84 or so, 84 to 90 at one time. And that was a ratio of about 1 change agent to every 9 or 10 people in the organization for our major implementation. So what's a change agent, right? They are people who are going to help support you in terms of delivering your messages, right? Making sure that people are getting the communication. They're going to help you with feedback loops. So, they're peers of the staff. They're not, we did have some change agents that were managers because they're so new to people. They weren't quite sure, who should I be sending? So they designated themselves, which was not bad. It's just that they're automatically one, right? So this is a piece of taking and creating new skills in people and growing your culture to be a change resilient and change adaptive culture. So what do you do when you look, what are you looking for when you choose your change agents? And by the way, as you're trying to furiously take notes, we're going to have a takeaway for you at the end of this. So we will have a handout that has a lot of what I'm telling you about change agents in particular, what to do and how to advance that in your organization for you at the end of this presentation. But some of the things that you're looking for an influencer, a natural leader. It doesn't have to be a positional leader, just a natural leader, people that go to them in a positive way. A critical thinker, in other words, somebody who's curious, who expresses has creativity, thinks outside the box, brings with them a healthy dose of skepticism, kind of that trust but verify sort of analysis and logic. You're looking for someone who's a problem solver. You're looking for someone who's change adaptive and resilient. You're looking for someone who's empathetic and compassionate, a relationship builder. Looking for someone definitely who has a level of self-awareness of how they impact others, right? How their actions impact others, that emotional intelligence quotient that you're looking for. And so managers need to help identify who are the appropriate people to represent my peer, as a peer, my team, my staff. And you work together then to foster that two-way communication between the frontline employees and the project. So the project managers can leverage change agents, we as the change agent project leveraged our change agents to support all the various communications and feedback loops and some of the other things just went in and out of my head. But anyway, we helped facilitate that for the project team. And not everybody has an independent OCL project, which we did for this team, for this initiative, but building it in as a piece of your project management team will allow you to have someone on board that can do all these things for you. And you really need to make sure that the change agent is committed to their purpose and that the manager is committed to their purpose, who's allowing them to be there, and that's a partnership. But then you have to equally be committed to their purpose for your project team. So that means for us, we had one-on-one conversations with an analyst. So Scotty Hamilton, who's on with us today, had a third of our change agents to contact, and he reached out to them so that at the bare minimum, in addition to all the other monthly meetings that we were doing with them as a group and building together and bringing forward as feedback and showing them demonstrations of things and sharing what was most important right now at that particular point in time for the project. In addition to all that we were doing with these folks, monthly newsletters specifically for them with like, here's your assignments. They had one-on-one conversations. And so they would learn, what is it that's working for you in your group right now? What's not? What are you hearing? How are people, how are you doing it supporting the questions and the knowledge, building of the folks in your area about what we're doing and why we're doing it? Not the nuts and bolts and of all the technical pieces, but do you know why we're doing this? And, are you on board sorts of conversations? So that's kind of what that partnership looks like and how it serves you. Then there's that piece about managing expectations, and that floated up today as one of the, the asks for coming out of this session. So let me tell you what our story was. With the COTS project, one of the things that we needed to make sure, and again, our piece of our culture, was that we always built our own stuff most often on our COBOL-based thing, legacy system. And that decision-making culture that we had, that very collaborative culture that we had, that by the time everybody got through their decisions and then we implemented in terms of doing the coding, everybody had that level of buy-in and they knew it was coming and they had plenty of time for that to happen. With the COTS project, it's really like, keep this thing as vanilla as possible. We do not want to have to do anything that is going to make it a mess for us when they do their version updates. And so we created, again, that decision tree, that sort of decision had to be done at the DMV management team by our DMV executives. They were the ones that had to make the yay or nay decision on anything that was customized. So people weren't used to that. And they were used to getting things exactly the way they wanted. And so this was a big piece, making sure that people understood that we will have to change the way that we do work to meet the way the system does work. We'll be delivering the same products and the same service, but we'll be doing it in a different way. And so it really made it that people needed to appreciate and understand what it would take to do that, the managers that had to lead these people, and what it would take to do that. And I think it was a little bit more work than they expected for some, but really that's a critical piece of managing expectations. And for our particular project, making sure that people understood that was critical. And where we saw that wasn't happening, people struggled a little bit more in terms of, well, no, we can't do the process that way. You have to change it. And those meetings would go on and on. So that's one thing in terms of managing expectations. The other, again, was around who's going to be able to make the decisions. And so we had guiding principles that our OCL team came in and worked with our DMV executives at the very front end. And in fact, we were there on the ground with our OCL consultants. We used some consultants in addition of our DMV staff because of the size and the risk related to our project. And they were instrumental in bringing their best practices into us. So never look at, always make sure that you kind of look at what is it that you're doing, How big is it? What's the scope? How many people is it going to impact? Is it external facing? And the value of bringing in external consultants to help you on the change side with that is that they bring with them a whole base of knowledge, and they're able to do these things like the culture assessment and working with your principal execs in a way that maybe you as an internal person are not able to do, right? That it's hard to be a prophet in your own land sort of thing sometimes. So we had them on board, and they came in and helped us right away with establishing guiding principles for the D&B exec team. And those guiding principles were so instrumental in allowing those that were in the decision-making roles for this particular project to know how to make their decisions, to know on what basis to do it. And one of the top, the very top one, I believe, was no customization, right? And then, you know, among those was like consider the experience from the customer's point of view was there, and creating efficiencies was in there. And so you know, it was just a list of 12 to 13 that they handed off to the project team. So this was such a present, right? Such a gift. And I know it was referred to often in terms of that project team and the decisions that they needed to make. So that was something that helped manage expectations as well, because then people were able to say, here's the guiding principles. Here's how we will be making our decisions. And to share that information with everybody that needed to know it, you know, staff all the way down to staff that would be using the system. Well, if you want to know why we made that decision, here's the tools that we're using to make that decision. And it helped again in managing expectations and letting people know that others were going to be using these sets of guidelines as standards and principles to make the decisions throughout the organization. And it also helped with a more rapid decision-making process. Managing expectations again, right? Like if you've got a seriously important project that relies on the knowledge of people who know how to do the work, making sure that managers understand that they need to send their most knowledgeable people to the project team and fill in behind them is really important. And you know, giving them some ideas of what would happen if it doesn't. And so making sure that they understand that really if they're not, unless they have like 5 people who do the same thing who are excellent, and that's just not the universe that I live in state government. We're often one deep, right? And we feel fortunate if we have 2 people who know how to do the same thing and can do it really, really well. That, you know, if there's no pain, there's probably not the right person.
Lisa, we had a question come in from Slido.
Ah, yeah. Thank you.
Related to that.
All right. Let me see. How long? Okay. So there's 3 questions here. How large was your OCM team on the DMV project? So we had a vendor, and we had up to, at one time we had 3 permanent staff when we first started out from the vendor, and they were with us all the time, and then it gradually went down to 2 permanent full-time staff plus a project manager that kind of worked off, you know, off-site in terms of running their contracts project. We had, well, I'm going to count our communications staff as well. So there was myself, 3 organizational change analysts, and a communications lead, and then a support communications person on our OCL and change team. So hopefully that answers that question. You mentioned cultural and readiness assessments. Are these standardized, or did you build the assessment survey template in-house? We actually used the assessment survey that our vendor provided. So, but it was based, and we let them know right off the bat that we were a pro-sci shop. So myself and Scotty and Nina, oh, and I forgot Nina, right? Oh my gosh. on our OCL team, Nina was our internal project manager, vital role. Oh my gosh, you know, couldn't have done it without her really managing all the tasks on our plate to do. And that was separate from the project's tasks. So we just, and in fact, we're an 8-year program now. And so we, our part, the OCL part of making sure that the changes stick is still very active. And Nina is managing that from our project management role and tasks and deliverables. So back to the assessment. So we used the assessment tool that was provided by our consultant, but it was based on ProSci's methodology. And I'll just really quickly throw out an acronym for you. ADKAR, A-D-K-A-R. If you haven't heard about it before, it's easy to look up. ProSci, P-R-O-S-C-I, and then ADKAR, A-D-K-A-R. It stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And so you're really assessing people on all those attributes, and their survey did that. So their survey was able to link to all those attributes, and that's what we used. And we used the same survey. We didn't change the questions for all 3 surveys that were done for each initiative. And then finally, people in support roles are often tagged as change agents, SMEs. They often have big workloads. How did that impact the project and how were they supported? Well, I'm glad you asked that, because one of the things that I would say in terms of managing expectations, that this will be hard work, right? That the work of being a change agent, the work of being a change leader in a manager position, the work of being a subject matter expert, even on, you know, a person being on the project team, it's all hard work. And you really have to be devoted, and you have to, kind of going back to the previous slide, you really have to be committed to the purpose of change agents and be strong in your partnership with them as a manager. I would say that we didn't do as well on that as I would have liked, that we could see, absolutely see, where we had strong leaders, strong manager, change agent partnerships. And, you know, we could see that in the way that their teams were informed. We could see that in their readiness levels. We could see that on go live day in terms of how people reacted to the unexpected. That 80-20 rule, right? That, hey, 80% of this is going to be programmed right, and 20% of it is, you know, going to be a bit of a surprise to us. It's not, maybe not going to react the way we thought it did, or nobody even remembered that that kind of transaction happens, and we have to kind of build something from scratch, etc. Those areas that had strong partnership between the managers and the change agents, who gave them time to do their work as a change agent, fared much better than those that did not. And we started out with telling folks, when we asked for the change agents, there's, you know, I could be talking for hours, so Ben, you're gonna have to shut me up at some point. But when we first solicited for the change agents, we'd actually put in a group already about a year or so ahead of time, which we called the SEEK, STP, Employee Advisory Committee. So there was about 20 people on that group representing various parts of the organization. So they helped us in terms of building the model for an extended change agent group, like I said, that got up to the 85-90 range at any one time. And we started off with letting managers know that in the beginning, you're probably going to need about 5% of their time devoted to the activities we need them to help with. But towards the end, the latter stages, that last third, the drive to the end, we're probably looking at 20% of their time each. You know, so that's a day a week. A day a week for them to be able to research all the information that's being thrown at them, to identify what in it needs to be given, what pieces of that information is relevant to their working units, taking time to meet with individuals or to get time on team agendas to talk about those things, share them, to attend our meetings and watch the demos and take that information back. That, you know, that was a significant body of work. And you know, in terms of those support roles they do, how were they supported? We supported them by providing all the information, but it really was the manager who had the most impact on their ability to perform in the role. So I hope that answers that question. Let's see, where are we? So the hard work piece, right? That is going to be, it is going to be hard work. So just managing that as an expectation with people that it's going to take, we kept telling people that it's going to take 6 months to stabilize after each rollout. And that's pretty much, you know, been the case. And that there's the things that they thought might work in terms of processes or organizations or handoffs or whatnot were probably likely going to change. And that happened too. We saw where they reorganized in advance of, and then they reorganized again in the throes of, and then they reorganized again at the, you know, after 6 or 7 months. And there's still some reorganizing going on as we continue to now leverage the system and lean into the efficiencies that we can create with it. But it took that amount of time. So for people to understand that, hey, it's not go live day and everything's perfect. It's a road to stabilize. And then there's that piece that I don't know that I've seen done really well anywhere, and I've had some time in private practice as well. So nowhere have I really seen done really, really well that we're validating that all the wins that we expected and that the return on investment of this investment is actually happening. And that's part of that reinforcement piece, right? That we're double checking and making sure that we're getting the wins out of this project, and that we're actually returning on the investment that we made. So the next, you know, thing about that, building relationships and breaking down silos with the change agents and the managers, it was really, really important for people to know what each other did in terms of units, what was in their way, and what can you do to help, right? Like setting up those meetings with one another with a upline or a downstream piece of the process that might be done in another unit, and really getting to know them and to know what their barriers were. Because chances are, you know, you might be asking people to take on some of that work, or collapsing some of that work, or getting rid of some of that work. So understanding about it and having that relationship built ahead of time is really, really helpful and important. Because again, you just don't know who might be your teammate tomorrow. You don't know what your teams are going to absorb. You just need to be able to leverage the project to schedule the opportunities too. This is something that we did a lot as an OCL team, was that we created the opportunities for people to have this relationship building experience. We did two large sessions, which we just called a masterclass, and it really, a lot of it was discussion circles where we had people coming together and talking about their issues, and people actively listening, and they could only get in and talk about it if they entered the inner circle. So things like that. We put together focus groups, we had master classes, we had breakout sessions at our change agent meetings. We did all sorts of things that we could to break down silos.
Lisa, do you remember what our administrator told everyone? What he promised we want to be kicking up the project?
I'm sorry, Ben, you broke up in and out for me, so I only caught about every other word.
Do you remember what our administrator promised employees at the start of the project? Do you want to share that?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that was critical to our project, again, you know, you're looking at a project that says this is going to create efficiencies, and you know, you might be absorbing somebody else's work. We had excellent executive sponsorship. on this, which any of you know is so critically important. And so Tom McClellan, our division administrator, you know, from the get-go was very active and visible and was making sure that everyone knew that no one was going to lose their job because of this. And he even said that at a legislative hearing when asked, you know, how many positions are going to be cut? And this is not about cutting positions. You know, this is about doing things more efficiently and getting to the work that's on our plate that we're not able to get to. And that same message was true for our employees. Anybody who is willing to learn new skills, do new things, will have the job at DMV, because there's so much that we need to be doing. So even though your role might be absorbed into another piece of work or not needed anymore because the system is able to do it, we've got work for you. So everyone knew right off the get-go that their job was secure. And that was just really important. I believe that's what you wanted me to share, Ben. So I know that we're coming up, trying to kind of monitor Slido 2 here, make sure that no questions are coming in there.
Looks like you have another question.
Okay, let's see here. Any advice for effectively engaging subject matter experts who have amazing subject matter knowledge but are also amazingly resistant to change? Great question. So yeah, people bring in a lot of buy-in and ownership, right? When they have these subject matter expert roles. So you're tapping them for the things that they know best. But you might also be mucking with the things that they know best. And you might be changing up things for them. And they're, you know, so very often what you're really experiencing is not resistance, but fear. And, you know, fear that they will no longer be relevant or needed or necessary, or that they'll lose their role in the organization as an expert, as the go-to person. So it's not that they're resistant to the change. It's that they're fearful of what's going to happen to them. So much like what we just talked about in terms of making sure that people understand that they are still going to be valuable to the organization is important with these folks. So they have a whole lot of institutional knowledge, most likely, that is still going to be necessary and needed in the organization. Systems can only do so much. People need to understand the why behind some of the decisions that are made. And what we actually found was that as we rolled out, there were people who were expert in the system. I mean, and you all who deal with COBOL know the green screens. Like, I got to go do a P004 screen, and oh no, I'm using an A35, and I got to go in here, and oh, I need 3 dashes, and I know I need, you know, 5. Do I have my 5 commas? And, you know, whatever it is that you're doing in order to just enter data from a customer, right? Now we were switching to this web-based, you know, very much more user intuitive, you know, like, oh gosh, oh my God, you know, really there's a block that says, you know, enter in a VIN number here. I just have to type in the 17-digit VIN number. I don't have to do this instead. So them, you know, having that sort of knowledge, and then having new people come in who had never had to learn the COBOL system, right? They never saw the green screen. They learned on the new system. That was a challenge for these folks. And many of them were our subject matter experts. And they were feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm left out, right? Like this new kid on the block, you know, regardless of what age, right? This new person that just walked in the door is able to catch on to this system right away, and I'm struggling because I'm having to unlearn. I'm having to unlearn everything I ever knew and relearn something new. So again, it's about managing expectations. It's about letting them know that they're still going to have value, But what we saw with those two groups was that, yeah, the new person knew how to do it, but they didn't know why they were doing it. So when a customer would say, well, why are you asking for that information? Or why do I have to give you that? Or whatever, they didn't know the answers. And the other people did. So, you know, being able to just tell them how they're still going to be useful and important, and that their status in the organization is not going to be compromised is probably the best way to deal with those folks who are subject matter experts but appear to be resistant to change. Hopefully that helped. How do you keep seasoned people from retiring when you launch a new system? So, you know, in all honesty, we had some that made that choice. And, you know, it's a spectrum. You're going to have people on any end. You're going to have those who are like the early adopters. I'm one of those, like, just throw change my way and I'm on it, right? You know, most of the times it's like, okay, great, something new toy, squirrel. But you'll have the others on the other end of the spectrum who do not want to change at all. It's just too hard for them. It's not in their DNA. They don't want it. In fact, they might have actually taken the job for the way that it was because that's what they wanted. I remember we had one employee, right, who just said, I want to be a data entry person. That's all I want to do. Now you're telling me I'm going to have to make decisions and to do this additional work and answer a phone. And I, you know, in my life, what I needed was just to be able to come to work and sit down and just enter data. And so, you know, that was a hard, you know, that's a decision that somebody is going to have to make. If the job, and if there are no other jobs like that, we couldn't promise someone that they would have similar work. We promised, and Tom, and we kept reiterating Tom's message that if you're willing to do new things, there will be work here for you at D&D. But we could not promise that they would have their same work. And so you're going to have some people that are going to retire. So just apply the 80-20 rule, right? You know, that you're going to have people at the 10% at either end of the spectrum, those that are just going to jump on the change, whether it's a good change or not change. They're just happy for change. And you're going to have those that just are never going to get on board, and they may be the ones that leave. You're not, one of the things that I would tell you is that you're not going to be able to get everyone. So focus on the 80. And what you really need to be focusing are the people that are on the downslide of leaning towards, I'm not supporting the change. Because if you don't meet their needs in terms of, you know, if they're on the cusp, you know, the bell curve, right? If you don't make sure that you get those people up and over the hump, that's when you're going to have a problem, right? Because they'll bring everybody back down, and then your change won't be supported, whatever it is. You know, I mean, I'm sure that everyone around the table here could tell stories of things that were implemented that people then dropped supporting, and that are just sitting on a shelf somewhere, not being used, not ever getting the return on the investment that was expected. So that's what we want to avoid, right? So I think that you know, I think I had on my calendar that this was supposed to end at 4 or 4:30. Ben, I'm not clear.
We have until 4:30, but we want to make sure we have time for other questions that might come in. But yeah, you still have time.
Okay, well, I would say let's do one more poll if we can, and you can send in more than one response. So you can send a response and then you can send in another response. But what are the biggest roadblocks impacting your projects today? these are going to fly by us, so we're going to see them, and I'll be able to kind of look at them later and share with Ben and others on the PMUG, because these might be things where I'm seeing leadership, not enough time, resources, not having committed resources. These are things that we could try to talk about a little bit more today, and or Ben can work on maybe other speakers. I'm more than happy to come back and talk about some of these things in terms of leadership, sponsorship, support, what that looks like. Stakeholders that cannot make a decision. Long oversight approval process and requirements.
Yeah, Lisa, we had a little bit of a challenge getting senior leadership to accept the idea of organizational change management, change leadership, and to invest money into that. And it is, you have to be persuasive.
Yeah, in fact, Ben, you'd probably be the better one to say what was it that finally won you guys over, right?
Well, I've seen so many projects where you build the best mousetrap in the world, but nobody likes it and nobody uses it. And yet it meets all the needs, it meets all the requirements, it does everything it's supposed to do. But you've got folks that are resistant to change. And, seeing so many projects go like that, it was important to me that we work hard to help staff prepare for the change.
Yeah, so and we had something going for us, actually. In every thundercloud, there's a silver lining, right? So many of you will remember that over about 20 years ago, DMV went on the road to replace its system, and it didn't go well. And so
I was hoping you didn't bring that up, but thanks anyway.
Well, actually, that was part of our storytelling in terms of why OCL. And there were some findings that actually DAS had to do a report and on what went right and what didn't go too well and what caused part of this. And a major part of that report identified the lack of buy-in by employees. And so that piece of understanding that employees were critical to the success of this program, I think, was one of the compelling stories that we had as internal consultants related to change, to say, here's why we believe this is important. We also had ProSci, research and analysis that we shared with our executives that demonstrated over and over and over again the exponential rate of success when OCL was attached to the efforts. And we actually used that research too to share that bringing in consultants was another positive way in which to make sure that we were successful for such a major intervention. So, Nina, are there other things that you would want to say about that?
Well, not that I wanted to say, but we do have some additional questions as well.
Okay. So, and then, Ben, this too, that I was there, well, actually you weren't on board yet, but I had done a year's worth of work with just the executive leadership team to make sure that they understood what they were committing to on the project side. Forget about OCL, right? Just to make sure that they understood that when we launch this project, that we know what we're going after, what our goals and our outcomes are, what this is going to mean to the agency, that we're all, when we say our vision of the future, that we are all have the same vision in mind. And so there was a year's worth of alignment work and strategic planning work that happened with the executive team before we ever launched the effort, right? Before we really even made headway. So that's a piece that is often overlooked on major projects, in my experience, that really forming that consensus at the executive level, and or making sure that if you have a single sponsor, that they are on board and committed, and that everybody has managed their expectations well around what success looks like and are on the same page. And then making sure that they know that they have to be present, they have to be active, they have to be visible. And so I met monthly with every executive sponsor, and I had a written roadmap that I handed out every month, and I still do, with like, here are the things that we need you to do for us this month. So many times people are put in sponsorship positions, but then no one tells them what they need from them. They're there for you to use as a project manager. They are there for you, and you need to utilize them, and you need to tell them what they need to do, but they need some direction from you, and they need information from you in order to be able to execute.
So there's a question that came in. Nina, you want to read that?
Sure. I would love to hear what you did specifically to prepare your staff for the system change and process changes. Were there approaches that worked better than others? And Lisa, you started to address that with your prior statements about the pre-work that you have been doing with the exec team, and anything else you would like to add to that?
Well, I mean, definitely, you know, we had an amazing program and staff in our program. So my peer and partner, Karen McCarty, who, you know, was the business side of our system implementation, and then, you know, Ben as our transformation manager, and so many others, right? But Karen and I, you know, we touched base and we worked together because she was overseeing our system consultant, FAST, and I was overseeing the OCL consultant and the OCL work. So FAST came in, and they, you know, they had their own sort of training methodology. So training sometimes falls under OCL, some training sometimes falls under a project. I've seen it, you know, handled both ways, but they really took on the training. But we supported that by letting them know, hey, here's where people are not feeling comfortable with the training that they've gotten, and here's where people are saying that they need more, or that the training isn't fulfilling everything that they're, you know, they need. So that feedback that we were getting from the peer change agents of, you know, people coming back from training and being able to say, missed the mark over here. Well, then they were able to adapt and respond to that. So that was one of the ways, and I'm, you know, kind of don't have the question in mind anymore, so I'm going to run to the chat window so I can see it. So the system change, process changes. So yeah, so the training, the change agent meetings, we would utilize those, and our vendor came in, the system vendor FAST, and they would show demos of, you know, things that were in process, and so that would get people all excited, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a oh my gosh way, like, you know, you're forgetting this and forgetting that. So there was always, even I don't know how many times we might have said at the front end, now this is just a demo, this is not the way it's going to be configured, you know, or we've only started the configuration on this, this is not going to be the way it is. But still, even that group of people who were managing that expectation and were change agents themselves would get kind of in a twirl about, but it's not doing this and it's not doing that. So, but showing them, that was a great big piece. We had infographics that we had, posters about what was coming, how the process was going to work, when training was going to be. We had all sorts of communication materials. We had the COTS, you know, Karen's group would put together a monthly newsletter about what was happening from the, you know, the development side of the process. We would contribute change related, resiliency related articles. We did training for change, right? We taught people about, our change agents and our managers about identifying resistance and how to deal with it, and how to manage expectations and their responses to change. And so, we just had a very full plate of ways in which we prepared our staff. So many tools and never letting up. I know that people said, oh my God, I don't want to hear about it again. But every time that person would say that, we'd find someone else who says, what are you talking about? Right? So having to repeat the messages over and over and over again sometimes. Those who picked up on them in the first or second time, may have gotten worn out, but we had others who had yet to hear it, because you have to know that people are not going to start listening until they realize and see the impact on them. So I hope that helped answer that question.
Yeah.
So, just looking through this great list of items here, again, I cannot stress what really, really does, and ProSci says this, and it's been my experience that it is so, so true, that what makes a project successful is really superior, strong executive leadership, sponsorship, and utilization of those sponsors. So it's you as a project manager, it's your job to keep them informed and to help them understand how they need to show up for you. Have them be your message carrier. Just find ways to use your sponsors. It's really strong project management, and I'm sure that everybody on this, on this session today has really great project management tools, and you're steeped in the project methodology, and you're making sure that you've got all your documents, all the PDQs ready to go, right? And that you're really following through and you're managing the tasks. And that third piece of that stool, that third piece of the triangle, is change management. Because if you don't have people adopting and utilizing the system, or following the process, or doing whatever it is that you just changed, it's not going to work unless people are not part of the equation. And I've not found that yet, right? There's always something that people are responsible for doing, and so you have to make sure that you have them on board, and having a dedicated arm of your project team that is skilled in that. And one of the things I will say is that it's easy to think you understand what change is, and as a professional, I'm still working on trying to build my reputation and that of everyone on my team as experts in this area, just like you all are experts at project management. This is a relatively new thing for state agencies and elsewhere, really, right? To have people who understand what this work is and why it's important, and to think about things in a different way that helps understand what is the behavior of human beings and what are they likely to react to, and how are they likely to navigate towards, is really important. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know. But I'd say that if you can get some really good change staff, some change analyst staff, who at least know that they don't know something, and they know to go get it, right? They know what to go look for. They're not in that I don't know what I don't know place, that you'll be at an advantage. I'd say those are kind of the three things that really make things more successful, and that you should make sure that you have all of that on your projects. And it's scalable, right? It's all scalable. Any other questions right now?
Yeah, be sure to submit your questions either via Slido or you can put them into the chat.
Yeah, so the other thing I wanted to do, and I'll ask Nina or Scotty, I guess we decided Nina so that I don't confuse anybody here. If you could put into the chat, we're going to download into the chat window a document. It's this Building Your Change Network. So I promise that we have a leave behind for you. So on this document, it's kind of like, you know, what kind of qualities would you be looking for in your change agents? You know, how many might you need? What types of training would you want to provide for them? What type of activities do they do? And, you know, kind of a change agent survival guide at the very end in terms of really needing strong sponsor support, strong manager support, and strong project support, and some bullets underneath each one. So you can download that actually from this chat window to your own computers, and we'll also make it available to Ben to send out with any follow-up to this meeting as well. So if that's not convenient for you to do, but we just want to make sure that that if you needed it and wanted it right away, that you had it. And if you took a look at it and saw it and you had some questions about any of it while we were still here together, that we'd be more than happy to answer those. So are there any other questions that people have?
Lisa, we have a question. People in support roles are often tagged as change agents SMEs. They often have big workloads. How did that impact the project and how were they supported? So we're talking about change agents and SMEs.
Yeah, so I thought I answered that one about how it was to make it work. It really does depend on the managers in terms of making sure that they provide that support. It is the managers that are sending these people, and with that gift of the individual that they're sending you, they also need to understand that that they have to give them the time. And so it's really getting back to whoever is the sender of your SME. They need to empty their plate, right? They need to make sure that the plate of the subject matter expert is empty. For our project, we had SMEs that were gone from their units, up to 18 months to 24 months, Ben, in some cases. And in some cases, they were gone over the entire implementation of both projects. So, you know, it was like a 3-year deal. And so they could not be doing any other work, right? I mean, this was their dedicated work. And so everything that they had on their plates had to be given to someone else. So one of the things in managing expectations with our manager we had to do was really making sure that they understood that if you're one deep and you're going to send that person, you better be getting somebody else skilled up right away. And we were saying that early and often, right? Before we ever had subject matter experts pulled into the functional teams. Now, did everybody do it? No. But they knew that it was necessary and they saw the truth in it. And some did get it done, right? And we have a lot more people now. Every time I'm talking to managers now, it's like, oh, I've got this group. I'm cross-training everybody in my unit on this thing now, right? I mean, cross-training is such a big deal right now in our organization in terms of making sure that there are multiple people who know how and the why behind the how of the things that we're doing. So cross-training really changed, I think, our culture. One of the things that we learned about our change agents was that our executive sponsor said, having them is awesome. We love that, and we want you to continue having this group. So we are in the process of resetting our change agent group, and So we have some that are saying, hey, I'm ready to step away and do new things, and we have others that are saying, hey, I want to keep being this, and let me tell my manager that I still want to do this role, because we'll be going out to our managers and saying, okay, it's a reset. We're really now looking for people to support changes, all the different types of changes, Workday, Oregon buys. Oh my gosh, pandemic, we have to figure out the way we're going to deliver our services differently. Oh my gosh, wildfires, we're having to close down offices. We have to figure out how we're going to deliver our services differently. There's changes every minute, it seems like right now. And so having a culture and investing in people who know how to support that change is an investment our management team has made. So I'm really excited about that, and much of what you're seeing in this handout that we're providing is what we're going to be using going forward on our reset for building our version 2.0 of change agents at D&D that will be there to support all of our internal and externally driven initiatives.
So Lisa, some folks are having trouble downloading the handout, so I'll just email it to folks when we're done today. But I think we're almost out of time. It looks like we've answered all the questions. Any final thoughts from Lisa, Nina, or Scotty?
I would just want to say thank you very much for having us, because if we can kind of share the value of what we firmly believe in is a really necessary piece of managing projects and initiatives, and we can get you to buy into that and help spread the word as well, then I feel like this has been a gift and much appreciated.
Thank you, Lisa. In closing today, this presentation was sponsored by the Oregon Project Management Advisory Board, and I'm going to put a link here in the chat window. We could use some more board members, and so consider joining the board. And if you just do a Google search on Oregon Project Management Advisory Board, there's just one. So, but anyway, there's the link, and we'd love to have more board members to help us plan these types of activities as well as others. We have our annual conference and a lot of other things that we do each year, and would love to have you help us by participating on our board. Lisa, thank you so much. We appreciate your words today. And Nina and Scotty, thank you. We know that you guys are a strong force in this effort as well. Thanks everyone for joining today, and have a happy Thanksgiving. Bye.